I had a good friend of mine. I'm not gonna say by name, but a good friend reached out to me and said, "Hey, Nick, you know what? I love the Reds, but I haven't been able to keep up on spring training. I don't know what the hell's going on with this team. I want to get really invested before opening day. Can you give me," his words, "a Reds fan guide for dummies?" So I said, you know what? I'm going to do it at the end of the show. I think that a lot of times doing this podcast and these live shows, I do it every day and I see the people in the chat. And I know a lot of the people in the chat like have followed along and know everything that's going on. But I think there's I forget about a lot of people that just don't follow the Reds as closely as I do, and probably they're smarter for it. But I want to kind of help those people understand what's going on with the Reds as we get closer to opening day. So I brought some graphics with me, and me and Craig are going to kind of go through this and kind of update you and give you an idea of exactly where things are at here on opening day. So here's the offseason storylines. First off, the big one: Reds declined Joey Votto's $20 million contract. He signed a minor league deal with the Blue Jays. He will be starting the year in AAA. So this will be the first year without Joey Votto, who I believe is the greatest Reds hitter, greatest Reds offensive player of all time. Reds signed first baseman, third baseman Jeimer Candelario to a 3-year, $45 million deal. The Reds did this a lot earlier in the offseason than some of the other deals. They really liked Candelario. They liked his veteran leadership. So he'll be a big piece. One of the bigger free agent signings the Reds have ever made. And it might not be a lot of money, but it is one of the larger ones they've ever done. Reds signed 3 pitchers: Frankie Montas, Nick Martinez, and Emilio Pagan. More on them in a minute. The big one: Jonathan India will not be a full-time second baseman, although things might be shifting with the Matt McLain injury. He's been playing in left field, first base, and DH in spring training. So it'll be interesting to see how he is used. The NL Central storylines: the Milwaukee Brewers, they traded away their ace, their former Cy Young winner Corbin Burns, but they did add Rhys Hoskins and Gary Sanchez, among others. Devin Williams, their star closer, he's going to be out about 3 months on the IL. The Cubs added Shoto Imagawa and Michael Busch. They lost Marcus Stroman. They fired David Ross and hired Craig Counsell in one of the wildest managerial changes I've ever seen. So interesting to the Cubs. Cubs also come into the season the healthiest by far of any of the NL Central teams. Pirates, they added Aroldis Chapman, Martin Perez, and Michael A. Taylor, also Rowdy Tellez and several others. Pirates probably the most active team. They didn't sign a lot of guys to big contracts, but they did sign a lot of actual, major league players this offseason. So they added, I think, probably more MLB players than anyone else. And then O'Neal Cruz returns. I know a lot of people like to downplay him, but I think he's got the potential to be one of the best players in the sport, and I think he's going to really change. Of course, he got hurt on a pitch. Was it Fernando Cruz that threw it? I don't know. Someone on the Reds hit him last year, broke his wrist, and he missed almost the entire year, but he's going to be a huge addition for them. And then the St. Louis Cardinals, they traded away Tyler O'Neill. They desperately needed pitching. They got some pitching. They added Sonny Gray, Kyle Gibson, Lance Lynn, and Middleton. Sonny Gray will be starting the year on the IL. So, Craig, looking through kind of the offseason storylines, what are some of the things that kind of stand out to you? And did I miss anything?
Well, the biggest thing that stands out to me is obviously the Reds' approach to depth, right? We're going to talk about it in a little bit. The starting lineup this year is, at least in my opinion, significantly better than the starting lineup last year, and that's thanks to some of the additions that they've made. Now, obviously, some injuries are going to derail a little bit of that, but that's not something that we can really control. Obviously, as a fellow Joey Votto lover, the declining of his option or of his contract certainly still stings a little bit, but then he went out and hurt his ankle on the first game that he played with the Blue Jays, and I mean, for lack of a better term, gave me a little bit of solace to believe that maybe he just doesn't have it anymore. I guess only time will tell. Look, I think one of the things that is going to be interesting to follow this year, and you touched on it earlier, is that the other divisions, especially in the NL, seem to be pretty written in stone already in terms of expectations. The NL Central race this year is really unknown. I think depending on who you talk to at any given time, you'll get probably 20 different potential outcomes in terms of the way that this division stacks up top to bottom by the end. A lot of people are kind of writing off Milwaukee, but ultimately, from my perspective, like they just have a history of being able to replenish. And so I struggle to really write them off. Devin Williams being out for 3 months is going to be a huge hindrance to them, though. Losing your closer for 3 months to start the season will be difficult. And then, just seeing what the Pirates are able to do is going to be a big storyline. I know a lot of people are high on them, but there's also a lot of people who are still low on them. And so that's really the storyline that I'm most intrigued to watch, is where do the Pirates go this year? O'Neal Cruz, many compare similarly to Ellie De La Cruz, especially in terms of their stature and their playing style. And, if he can bring the same type of energy to Pittsburgh that Ellie brought to Cincinnati last year, then you really should watch out for the Pirates. They've got an opportunity to be competitive this year at the very least.
All right, kind of going through the Reds injury news as we get ready for the start of the season. Nick Lodolo is supposed to be ready on April 10th. He's going to throw make two minor league starts to start the season. But everything, we knock on wood, has projected well for him. Looks like he's going to be ready, and he's going to bump someone out of the rotation that we'll talk about in a minute. Sam Moll, Alex Young, and Ian Jabot all starting the year on the IL. Moll and Jabot are throwing, and I think are close. I think it's just more of they're just not ready for opening day. I don't see them, either one of those injuries is anything that's going to be a hindrance to them very long term, and I expect them to join the Reds bullpen fairly soon. TJ Friedl, fortunately, fractured his wrist right at the end of spring training. One of the more brutal injuries that we'll kind of talk about when we talk about the lineup here in a second. He's expected to miss about 6 to 8 weeks. We just got the update about an hour ago about Matt McLain. No timetable for his return is still, I guess, the thing, but he had surgery officially. At this point, it kind of feels like whatever Matt McLain gives you this year is almost a bonus. I think he will play at some point this year, but I don't think at this point you're really banking on him. And Craig, correct me if I'm wrong, on what he can give this year. And then Brandon Williamson, he's starting the year on the IL. Doesn't sound like he's going to be out too long. Didn't sound like he also was going to make the opening day rotation, but he should be able to be a contributor if the Reds need him in the near future. Any other thoughts on kind of the injuries here, Craig?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Matt McLain coming back this year, even though the Reds claim that they expect him back, I think anything that you can get out of him is just going to be icing on the cake at this point. I don't think that you can really go into the season expecting to see him, which is unfortunate for sure. TJ Friedl, obviously, expected to be on the shorter end of that 6 to 8 weeks, but we don't know exactly what that target's going to look like. The big thing for me as we go into the season, and as Nick Lodolo and Brandon Williamson become healthy, is what the Reds are going to do with the rotation. Last year, obviously, the Reds had to lean on a lot of young guys who didn't have major league experience, I should say, to come in and pitch games. This year, they're going to have the depth, hopefully, barring more injuries, to really kind of manipulate the starting rotation a little bit more at their leisure. Guys like Nick Martinez have a little bit of flexibility to potentially pitch out of the bullpen if needed. If everybody comes out and they're pitching lights out, and then you get Nick Lodolo back and Brandon Williamson healthy, you're really going to have to figure out what to do there. And that's going to be the biggest challenge, I think, for David Bell here in the first month or two of the season, is really figuring out what that rotation is going to look like once Nick Lodolo and Brandon Williamson are healthy, because Brandon Williamson certainly looked good enough this spring to earn a roster spot. But with the injury, obviously made that decision a little bit easier. And Nick Lodolo, we both agree that when he's healthy, has the opportunity to really be a front of the rotation kind of guy. So David Bell's going to have some challenges on his hands, and how he handles that could really lay out the success of the Reds over the course of the season.
All right, here's what I'm projecting as the Reds opening day lineup. We talked earlier with Charlie Goldsmith, and he thinks Santiago Espinal is not going to play as much as maybe I do. That's maybe an interesting thing to see. Hard to really predict the lineup. It's definitely not as fluid as a lot of other years going into the season. I think Will Benson is going to be leading off just based on the last couple spring training lineups against right-handed pitching. I think Ellie De La Cruz and Will Benson will also be playing center field. I think most of the time when he starts, as long as Stuart Fairchild's not in the lineup, with TJ Friedel out, so kind of the cause and effect there. Ellie De La Cruz, shortstop, it looks like he's pretty much penciled into the number 2 hole. Spencer Steer looks like he's pretty much penciled in the number 3 hole, playing left field, I think, more than anything. Probably some DH as well, but I think he's probably just going to be left field and DH. I know they can play him at second base, they can play him at first base. I don't anticipate he'll be doing much more other than those two. Jake Fraley, cleanup and right field. Jamer Candelario batting 5th, playing third base. Christian Encarnacion Strand batting 6th, playing first base. Jonathan India 7th. I think he'll probably DH on opening day. That's my guess. But he's going to play some first base, some second base, and maybe some outfield as well. Tyler Stephenson 8th, catching. Luke Maley had a great spring, and I think is going to challenge Tyler Stephenson in terms of playing time. But I still think Tyler Stephenson is definitely catcher number 1, at least for now. And then I think the Reds will go with Santiago Espinal at second base on opening day. I think the last thing you want is errors at second base. I think you're going to go with the sure-handed guy. But one guy that we didn't talk about is, and probably one of the biggest storylines of the offseason, is Noelvi Marte, suspended for the first 80 games of the season, and he's ineligible for the postseason. And that just after the Matt McLain injury made that suspension even more of a big deal for the Reds. But one thing that we could see, especially if Matt McLain is not back until later in the year at best, is Jamer Candelario could slide over to second base. I know that was part of the thought behind signing him, and Noelvi Marte slides into third base. And I think at that point, you still have a really good infield with those guys. But it's going to probably a lot's going to depend on how well does Santiago Espinal play. If Jonathan India does get reps at second base, is he able to play adequate defense? I don't think he did last year. I'm excited about his bat though. Craig, what's kind of your overall thoughts about the lineup? And one other quick point, I think Nick Martini is going to play a lot more against right-handed pitching than people think. I think that he's a guy you also got to throw into this mix as well. But Craig, any other thoughts on this lineup?
Well, my thought in everybody's going to have a different opinion on this, but when I look at this lineup, I don't see any breaks for the opposing pitchers 1 through 8, really. I think every single person in this lineup right now has an extremely high upside. There's certainly going to be some guys who go through some cold streaks, and that'll have to be addressed in the moment. But having guys like Stuart Fairchild and Nick Martini and Luke Maley to be able to come off the bench is certainly an upgrade over last year. I don't remember. I apologize who mentioned it in the chat last year, but just for comparison, I want to run through last year's starting lineup on opening day, just for fun, to avoid some French. So opening day starting lineup last year, India was your second baseman. Friedel was in center field. Jake Fraley was your DH. Tyler Stephenson batted cleanup as your catcher. Jason Vossler was your number 5 hitter. Shout out Jason Vossler. Will Myers was in the 6 hole. Spencer Steer at 7. Will Benson then at 8. And Jose Barrero came in the 9 hole playing shortstop. Fairchild was the only player to come off the bench in that game. I don't recall exactly who else was on the bench to start the year, but long story short, when I look at the lineup this year versus that year, I see obvious holes with Vossler, Myers, and Barrero that, as an opposing pitcher, you've got a quote unquote break right now. Vossler and Myers both picked up hits. Barrero did not, but realistically, as an opposing pitcher, you're not really threatened by those guys, especially to start the season. Versus now, look at this season's lineup. You've got guys like Will Benson, who has shown he can mash. Ellie De La Cruz, who creates all kinds of havoc when he gets on base. So not only are you worried about hitting, but you're worried about potentially putting him on base with a walk. Spencer Steer batting behind him means that hopefully Ellie De La Cruz sees a lot more strikes to be able to attack. One of the struggles he had last year was swings at pitches outside of the zone. So if he can get a lot more strikes to attack, he'll have a much better year. And then obviously Fraley, Candelario, CES has shown that he can absolutely mash. India, when healthy and when right, has shown extreme ability to be successful. Tyler Stephenson started off the spring really cold, but then really heated up at the end. And if he can keep that going, will be a lot of value. And then depending on what that 9 hole looks like, whether it's Espinal, who's shown Not necessarily a ton of talent at the plate, but at least can get on base. Or Fairchild, who had an amazing spring, or Martini, who showed a lot of clutch ability last year. So from me personally, I look at that and I'm extremely encouraged at the lineup. And as an opposing pitcher, I don't think I'm excited to go against that on opening day. Sorry, Josiah Gray.
And correction, Nick Martini, not Nick Martinez. Hopefully, Nick
Oh,
Martinez.
my fault.
No. I said that. I said that
Oh,
earlier.
okay.
Hopefully Nick Martinez is not playing in the field. Nick Martini is the guy that I think will play a lot more against right-handed pitching than people think. That's kind of my prediction. All right, the Reds starting rotation. Frankie Montas will get the ball on opening day. Hunter Green will start game 3. Nick Martinez starting game 3. Andrew Abbott game 4, and Graham Ashcraft will round out the rotation. You probably by now know about Montas. Got Cy Young votes a few years ago with the Oakland A's, but has battled injuries, only threw an inning last year. A lot of upside, but a lot of questions with him. A great pitcher to have, but what will he give you in this year? We'll have to wait and see. Hunter Green, I think a guy on the rise at number 2. Nick Martinez in the starting rotation was a little bit of a surprise. Nick Martinez was signed as a guy that could either start or relieve, but he was outstanding in spring. He had one start against the Dodgers A lineup with Freddie Freeman, Mookie Betts, Shohei Ohtani, and he mowed them down. In fact, he was perfect. He was perfect in the start until the rain came and actually called the game. I think he went 5 perfect innings against that Dodgers lineup. So he had a great spring. The big Montas, Green, and Ashcraft are safe in the rotation, barring injury. Nick Lodolo is coming back on April 10th as long as everything goes according to plan. So the question is, as long as there's not some other injury, which is always another possibility, is does Lodolo replace Martinez or Abbott? I think the answer to that question is a little more complex because I think it also is how's the bullpen doing? Does the bullpen need Nick Martinez? If the bullpen really needs Nick Martinez and Nick Martinez maybe doesn't necessarily dominate his first couple starts, I think you just slide Martinez to the bullpen and you leave Abbott in the rotation and you put Lodolo in. But if Nick Martinez is dominant, the bullpen's fine. I think Andrew Abbott probably gets pushed down to AAA, which probably shocks a lot of people, but I don't really see another scenario unless there's an injury. Do you see it any different, Craig?
No, the only thing I would say is that Andrew Abbott struggled towards the end of the year, and I think he was getting worn down. So he's a candidate for me to slide into the bullpen. If Nick Martinez comes out and continues to shove like he was over the spring, maybe moving Abbott to the bullpen and only using him in 2 or 3 inning spurts at most will allow us to save his arm. And if he's pitching well, there's nothing stopping him from sliding back into the rotation or allowing David Bell to really give guys a rest here or there. Ultimately, when we talk about the depth, I think it's really going to be focused on, assuming all players are healthy, it's really going to have to be focused on how do we ensure that our rotation stays healthy for the 162 games, hopefully plus come the playoffs, not necessarily otherwise. So, Andrew Abbott being able to come out of the bullpen and throw a couple innings may serve as the benefit there. Obviously, Nick Martinez can fill a similar role. He's shown that in the past. But again, if you've got guys coming out and shove, Abbott potentially to AAA or potentially to the bullpen makes sense to me.
All right, and then looking at the bullpen as it stands on opening day, Alexis Diaz, of course, your closer, an all-star closer. You got Lucas Sims, Buck Farmer, Fernando Cruz back, as well as TJ Antone. The additions, the big one was Emilio Pagan. Reds paid him $8 million, which is quite a bit for a reliever, especially for the Reds. He's a guy that started spring hurt, but his last couple outings was really solid after kind of some rough first outings. So he's a guy to watch. It's interesting to see where he kind of slots in. Is he immediately going to be thrown towards the back of the bullpen, or the Reds going to kind of ease him in since he did start camp late? The Reds added Brent Suter, a local guy. The interesting thing about him is the Reds have kind of been stretching him out. I know I was talking to Charlie Goldsmith, and they actually had him plan to go 3 innings at one point. He had a rough outing and didn't go that long, but they are planning to pitch him more of a long reliever type. So that's something to watch. And then a last minute signing for the Reds, they got Justin Wilson. He didn't make the Dodgers. The Reds picked him up. He's a guy that looked really good at times this spring. A guy that has worked on a new slider that has really turned him into a weapon. I think he might be the underrated piece of that bullpen that we get to the end of the year and we go, Justin Wilson's a really, really big key to this bullpen for the Reds. Anything there stand out, Craig?
I think right now, as the bullpen lays out, you're fine. It'll be, when Sam Moll comes back, are you going to look and have 3 left-handed arms in your bullpen, or are you going to maybe send Justin Wilson or Brent Suter? I guess packing. I can't imagine that either of them have options, but who knows? So that'll be a question for me. Brent Suter obviously is a different type of pitcher than the Reds have had in the past year or so. Not necessarily a hard thrower, but gets soft contact and gets out. So the left-handed bullpen spots will be the storyline for me. Obviously, the other one is TJ Antone and his health, right? When he came back last year, threw pretty well, and then again got was sore again afterwards, I guess. So seeing his health will certainly be an interesting story over the course of the year as well.
All right. I'll run through the guys that have options just so kind of everyone is aware. There's a lot of guys that don't, like Craig said. There are a lot of guys that if you try to take them off the roster and send them to AAA, you'll risk losing them. The guys that have options are Alexis Diaz. He's not going to get option unless things really, really go wrong. Fernando Cruz has options. TJ Antone has options. On the IL, Sam Moll and Alex Young have options, but no one else does. So Fernando Cruz and TJ Antone, you better pitch really well because the Reds have the ability to send you down and not risk losing anyone, which I know people say, oh, you got to have the best pitchers on the roster. And I mean, I understand that logic, but it's a long season. And how many guys did the Reds have to call up throughout last year? You don't want to be dumping guys in April and May that you may need later on. So Cruz and Antone, I think those guys are the 2 guys to watch that might be kind of pitching for their spot on the roster. And as mentioned, when we were talking with Tom Nichols, Tony Santillan had an incredible spring, and really, I just was a numbers game why he didn't make the bullpen. So that's kind of the things to watch there. The NL Central, this is the PECOTA projections, and I'm assuming if you're one of the people that we're kind of wanting a rundown, you probably don't know what PECOTA is, so let me run through it. PECOTA is kind of the gold standard in terms of projections. There's no perfect projections. Baseball is one of the most unpredictable games. Reds were projected to lose close to 100 games last year and ended up winning 82. So projections are certainly not always right, but this is the projections. And I know people will look at the Reds projected to win 79 if you round up and go, oh my gosh, they're only projected to win 79. I think the big key there, though, is the Cardinals are only projected to win 82. And so you're only math on the fly. You're only 5 games behind them, as opposed to the NL West. I think the Dodgers are projected to win 101, and the Giants are at 85, and the Braves are at 100, and the next is the Phillies at like 85. So while, yes, the Reds may be projected at 79, they're well within any sort of margin of error to win the NL Central. And then also you're playing against teams that aren't projected to win a lot of games more than any other team. So you can maybe stack up some more wins as opposed to teams like the Phillies who have to play the Braves, a ton of times, and the teams in the NL West who have to play the Dodgers a ton of times. So I think the Reds are really close here. I think the Reds can make the playoffs. They'll need things to go right, but I think every team in the NL Central needs things to go right to win the division. And then, Craig, you mentioned it earlier, but the Pittsburgh Pirates, I'm surprised they're only projected at 71. I think they're a lot better than that. But how they play, especially early in the season, really might determine how this NL Central race goes. Because if they're if they're actually a 71-win team, then you're going to have more teams up at the top stacking some more wins. But yeah, that'll be kind of interesting to track here, Craig.
Yeah, I think other teams, being projected to win 100 games or whatever, is fine and dandy. That race will be not super close in those divisions, it doesn't seem. But when you look at the NL Central, and realistically, it feels like it can go any way. It'll be interesting to see. I think having the Reds projected at 78 wins is certainly low, but I think it just shows the competitiveness that's expected from the NL Central. I think a lot of these teams are going into the season with some unknowns, whether it be injury related or new signings or young guys that they're going to be relying on to really propel them through the season. It'll be interesting to see. I think that, like you said, the Pirates at 71 wins certainly feels low, and if they can win closer to 80 games, then that certainly is going to take wins from other teams in the division as well. It's shaping up to be similar to last year, where 82 wins is going to be competing to get into the playoffs. I still think that the Reds have the ability to be winning in the 86 to 88 range if they stay healthy and everything goes their way. But again, it's just so much of it is unknown in baseball that it's really hard to put a whole lot of weight into preseason projections. I mean, what was the Reds' projected win total last year, and where did they end up? So, it just I don't put a whole lot of weight into it. Probably similar to the weight I put into spring training stats.
The betting odds are a little bit more favorable actually for the Reds. The Reds are quite a big gap between them and the Brewers in terms of winning the NL Central. I saw one no free ads betting site had the Reds at plus 150 to make the playoffs, which that's right there. I mean, that's like right on the cusp. You're pretty much going to always, if it's a 50-50 team, you're going to get some extra juice betting them to make the playoffs. So, yeah, I mean, look, the Reds are right there. I think one thing to kind of watch is you're kind of watching early season games. I think if you're a Reds fan, you want the Dodgers and Braves to just win all the time. You want them to rack up wins. You want them to win 110 plus games, because that's going to make everyone else have less wins in the National League. And like you said, Craig, 82 might get you in if the Dodgers and Braves both win 110 plus. Now, if those teams are only like 90 win teams, then you're going to see the last couple wild card spots go up a little bit, and it'll be a little bit more you'll have to have a higher threshold to get in.
Yeah. If we were betting men, which, as some of you may know, we are, I certainly don't expect the Reds to finish in third. I think there's a lot of credit being given to the Cardinals and the Brewers that maybe their rosters don't command right now. But again, I think sometimes with these projections, the historical value of the franchise, although not supposed to be weighted, certainly comes into play. And so when teams like the Brewers and the Cardinals have historically run the division, you're going to see that relayed into projections, whether it's supposed to be or not. And so Sonny Gray, these projections also, it's worth noting, came out before spring training started and before any injuries went down. So, if they reran these projections, that certainly could change things. But I think ultimately the season and the NL Central storyline is just going to be a close race for a majority of the season. And the Reds just need to stay healthy and avoid long losing streaks. I don't think either one of us expect a duplicate of the 12-game winning streak that they had last year, but if they can avoid some of those 6 to 8 game skids, I think it puts them in a really good position come the end of the year.
Yes, and I do think when you have teams that are this close together, bunched in terms of projections, health is probably going to be what comes down to. And the Reds have a lot of injuries, but so does just about everyone else in the division outside of the Cubs. So it'll be a fun season to follow for sure.